Welcome to another episode of Beyond Data Management Podcast, as always, powered by HS GovTech. I'm your host, Cameron Garrison. Thanks for joining us today and spending time with us. We have a really interesting guest who made a special trip just to see us in studio today. And the topic is something that's fascinating. I think will resonate instantly with every environmental health department that might be watching. While it's not quite as bad as it used to be, payment processing, online processing of payments, the ability to take them electronically, government is still not where private sector is. In a world where with one click, you can pretty much order anything you want, and in some cases have it on your front porch the same night. Government's not quite there yet. So our guest is really have enjoyed getting to know and working with this guy because you don't see a lot of folks anymore that stay the course in GovTech for decades. So without further ado, let's welcome into the Beyond Data Management Studios, Chris Lewis, who currently with CORE, which is changing the municipal and government payment processing space. And full disclosure, they are the payment processing partner for HS Cloud Suite, and we're so happy that they are. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Cameron.
Let me also just thank you. You're from Canada.
I am. I'm Canadian. You might hear somewhere between the accent. I might drop an A every once in a while, and I heard that there's a 25% tariff on this show. So.
I was going to say, any trouble at the border?
No, not yet. And hopefully the people that are watching this don't actually suddenly say maybe it's time to stop.
Tariffs on the show as viewership plummets. That's really funny. I love that. But you guys do business all over and a ton in the U.S. You've been at it for a long time. So let's just start with your story. There's not a lot, and I know we're not the only two, but there's not a lot of lifers in the municipal, state, local GovTech spaces. There's more turnover, it seems, than that. Partially driven, I think, by all the acquisitions that have happened over the last decade or so, where smaller boutique providers get rolled up into a bigger one. But talk about your journey. You put me to shame in terms of physical fitness, and we'll get to that. You're a former professional football player as well. But how did you get into GovTech, especially the subspecialty of payments, and billing and things like that? Because that was really rudimentary a couple of decades ago. So maybe tell everybody your journey and how you got to CORE, and then we'll talk about the exciting things CORE's doing now.
Yeah, thanks. It is interesting. I was raised in a government family, which is interesting. So you go back far enough, and the telephone systems were still government owned. And so my dad was a government telephone worker, and mom worked in the same government, in the same telephone company. And prior to privatization, like my dad was a 30-year HR guy.
And this was in Canada?
Yeah, up in Canada. And with a specialty of doing union negotiations for the unions and interesting household. My mom was a shopkeep in the same union, so I had the union breaker and the union shopkeep in the same house. So it was it was a conflict-ridden home, to say the least. No, but I think coming out of, you mentioned I was a football player. Coming out of sport, ran around and did some interesting stuff with friends in the private sector, in food industry and wholesale foods and stuff. And what actually brought me into what I'd call arm's length government was the deregulation of the power sector in 99-2000. So up in Alberta, similar to California and the New York States and Texas, they deregulated the energy industry, the electric energy, and it became a derivative market. So we were selling contracts to hedge your power usage, and customers had choice. So my introduction into government was interesting. I worked for a government-owned utility, like a municipally owned utility in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We became the leader in our province in doing government contracts for power usage. And so it was really, really interesting that I learned that there was a real gap in relationship with customers, even from a government standpoint, because as a government-owned utility, I had to work with government agencies who were used to not really having a relationship with their power provider. And we had to build the entire thing. And so we went from zero to $4.5 billion in revenue in like 18 months. And it was like skinny margins because it's a derivative product. But we landed the federal government, we landed Walmart, we landed Department of National Defense. We had like some of the largest contracts at the time, and they were like long-term contracts worth millions of dollars. And we really had a sense for how that built up. Now, bring in the billing side of it, the power industry went from 12 bills a year or 12 billing cycles a year against maybe 3 channels on a meter to 8,760 separate reads against 12 different channels on a meter. And we were building products that took advantage of all of them, peak demand and hourly usage and everything else. And so at first we thought this is really great from a product standpoint to be able to build all these things, but then we had to build them. And we were competing with Enron. We were competing with these large American companies that had come in to Alberta to take over. And so we had to get really good at it. And what happened was when Enron collapsed, the infrastructure that they had built, we bought.
So, oh, really?
Yeah. So we bought the Enron billing company, and it was called Cognera. Actually, we didn't buy it. I ended up at the company that bought it. So my transition into GovTech was in 2005. I was with Direct Energy for a little bit, which was, a UK built company. So 2005, 2006, I transitioned to the GovTech side with this complex billing company called Cognera. And Cognera was the remnants of the Enron billing company after they had gone belly up.
Fascinating, because they were like manipulating the market. They were crazy stuff, right?
Yeah. They, on the books, they looked like they were just driving billions of dollars. And it was, by the way, it wasn't really illegal. It was unethical, but it wasn't really illegal at the time because we could be trading on something called the basis between two markets, but there's never delivery on it. So when you start talking about commodity, like it was, you're showing you make $1 million in a year, and I'm showing I make $1.2 million, in a day, and I make $1.2 million in a day, but nothing, it's all the same product and it never changes hands just because of the difference between two markets. And it was an interesting time. We thought it was going to be the next big financial opportunity and everything, and Enron manipulated it and ruined it for everybody. But the technology that came out of it was really strong. So largely at the commercial level, we had these products that were taking all of this data in, and they were doing all these things with it. And so we built that company up, sold it to the Constellation group of companies, which Harris was the division that bought us. And they took me out of that company and then gave me money to start a data management company called SmartWorks. And so I was the first startup inside the Constellation group. And we took this company from 0 to 10 million in 3 years of recurring revenue, had 350 customers, just managing data, like just managing not just meter data and utility data, but started managing customer use data, started managing, like we had some customers that were looking at how, from a health and safety standpoint for the police, when they're driving to a crime scene, the utility would work with them to bring LED lights up to 150% of illumination on the route that they were going through, so that citizens would notice that that was a route that the police were on, and it helped the police be safer because the illumination on the street lights is higher than usual.
Wow.
And this was all happening from data management through systems of control. And like it was really cool what was happening in the grid space. And then it just kind of died. Like the whole grid space area died. I think go back to the Obama administration, they pumped a whole bunch of money into infrastructure, like unreasonable amounts of money from a budget standpoint, I think. But they put a whole bunch of money into it. A bunch of companies grew up. And then after the Obama administration happened,
pullback.
There was a pullback, and you're going, well, we can't keep spending this kind of money, guys. Like it's not sustainable. And in the same conversation, let's be smart about what infrastructure looks like. So we being Canada and the United States hadn't really spent a lot of money, say, on water infrastructure. So we were spending all this money on things that were really cool. And all of a sudden people are like Flint, Michigan, people are dying because of bad water infrastructure. And so there's just a shift on where stuff went to, I think, back to basics. But I had stayed in the market, in the tech market, the GovTech market, and got acquired by Harris. And then from Harris, jumped into small gap in my resume, doing something else in supply chain management, and then I got into payments. So started with SEW, which is a company out of Irvine, California, that also has great engagement software, and then went to Paymentus, then Una/Citybase, and now with Core. So I've jumped around the industry a little bit, but I've seen it from all different angles in the last 25 years. For
That
sure.
grid project sounds fascinating because like you're literally tying lights on the street to an action that happened from the police dispatch, right?
Yeah. So it would be whether it was from dispatch, and I think now, like, that would have been 2014 when we were looking at some of that stuff, 15. So in the last 10 years, even AI alone, voice recognition from an officer saying that they're, or even from dispatch saying that they're going here, could be interpreted by an AI that could trigger something in the grid to do something. It could all be automated now. There doesn't even have to be a lot of stuff in between.
Is that going to come back? Because you said dropped off and surge of spending post 9/11, new administration, collapse of spending. Does it need to come back, or what do you think the future of those master projects is?
Yeah, you know what? It'll be really interesting. So the driver behind most of it is grid stability. And grid stability, in a world where you're really pushing renewables, it's hard because the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time, and the battery technology isn't quite there at an industrial level to really drive it.
That's the dirty secret, right? The base load still has to be gas, coal, nuclear, because the renewables are not reliable enough for a base load, are they?
No, not until the battery technology gets there. And what's really interesting is that the world leaders in those kind of battery technology is China, and we're not playing real nice with them anymore.
If we have a 25% tariff on this show, I think it's times 10.
Yeah, 100, yeah. So that 195% tariff on anything coming out of China to help us isn't going to help the grid.
Yeah.
But I think that the reality is that we still need natural resources to have a base load. The base load is growing, like computing processing alone is pushing. Like, it's amazing. There isn't a parent that I know that doesn't have at least one gaming console in their house today. And those gaming consoles that stay on all the time, associated with
they drain,
the TVs,
don't
they? They push electric usage.
Yeah.
And so
I think Eric Schmidt gave a talk very recently, because it's been in the news, that AI is projected over a fairly short period of time to need, I think it may have been 2030, 99% of the current electricity production of the United States right now. So money's going to have to go into the grids, right? And they're going to build nuclear and
absolutely.
But is that good for grid stability overall?
If it's
is AI forcing it?
Yeah, I think AI before that, electric cars were. So there was a conversation that I heard, and again, third hand, and I don't know that the stats are exact, but if you put a charger on half of the houses on a block to charge your electric car, you have to redo the transformers and everything else around it, because the current load to meet the current max load to meet a typical neighborhood wouldn't be able to handle the excess load if everybody was charging at night. And so you need like,
which is how you end up with, remember in 2022, it got memed everywhere. California just passed their, no gas cars after a certain date, got to go electric. And then they started having brownouts, and the first thing they advised was, "Don't charge your car."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think as a bit of a muscle car and older car fan, I think it's not the greatest for the environment, but it's also not the sole driver of pollution in this world. And there's lots of different ways. Like, we can talk about deforestation, we can talk about the agriculture industries and stuff, and I think that attacking just the energy industry and specifically trying to drive everything to electric has trillion-dollar implications. And, coming full circle, the tech that's going to be required in customer service, in automation, in grid management is going to be another heyday when we get there, because you're going to have to do a lot of stuff to make it work.
Yeah, and it's not all there yet.
No.
So you're at Core now. Tell us about Core. Obviously, I know a lot about what you guys are doing, but you obviously are partners who work with environmental health departments, but it's a much bigger market for billing and payment processing. Is it fair to say that government is still, like, in general, government runs probably about 10 years behind of cutting edge commercial technology? I don't know if it's that far, but I do know, because I pay power bills and I pay water, and like, the government's really good at collecting money. And it is not the same experience generally as you have from any of your big companies that you deal with. So,
For sure.
how far behind do you think it is now? And is there a particular area or segment or piece of it that is worse off than others that you all are working to change that?
It's a great question. So I think the stats that we have are like if I were to ask any of your listeners, or if we were to talk to a general person on the street, when the last time was that they mailed a check to Amazon or to or to eBay or to anybody else, right? Like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But in government payments specifically, so whether you're paying a water bill, whether you're paying a tax bill, whether you're paying for a traffic fine or a dog license, only about 40% of people are doing it online. Like it's less than half right now.
It's still currently only at 40.
Yeah. When you look across all of the different,
Which means checks and cash still.
a lot of checks, a lot of cash. One of the interesting parts is that we've seen stats that go as high as 30%, but we tend to settle in about 18% of payers are unbanked and underbanked, so they only deal in cash. Hence the rise of kiosks and better cashiering software. But I think that the reality is that there's still a general mistrust of government about putting your credentials in to pay a bill. Yeah. And one of the reasons, at least at core, that we believe that is because it's such a disparate experience. There's no continuity in the experience. Meaning, if you're paying a permit bill, if you're paying a utility bill, if you're paying a traffic ticket, it's all different, even though it's all the same relationship with your government entity, be it your city, your county, your state.
And you have to set up an account with the health department, one with, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And you can't just go in and see a dashboard of every bit of money I have to pay to all the agencies writ large. Is that where you guys are driving?
And so what core has decided as a slight change away from some of our competitors that are focused on real estate and insurance and other things is that we are only government. So core has now decided to be an only government provider, with the single goal of saying, let's do everything for we have 1,000 municipalities as our customers, and we want to be the provider for everything for them. So it doesn't matter if you have to get a permit for that family picnic that has over 200 people, because that's where cities are at now, right? You can't just go to the park and have a picnic. You got to get a permit for your picnic. And so, but whether it's that permit, or you're a business that's working with your environmental health bill, or you're doing a building permit to build a deck off the back of your house, or a building permit to build a new building, or you're paying your utility bill, or you're paying 10 utility bills because you own real estate, let's make it all the same.
One sign in, one portal.
Payment methods are there. There's mapping that takes you to all the different places so that when you get on your dashboard, you can see everything that you owe. Hopefully it starts to cut down on some of the delinquency. And then build the communication tools so that all the different agencies can start to talk to you and say, you've got a bill ready, you got a bill past due, let's get this handled, because where a lot of the cost comes, government is the only sector in the world that'll spend $200 to collect $100. And
that's so true.
And they'll do it by cutting off your power, they'll do it by rolling a truck, they'll do it by having to have a person call, by sending registered mail, they'll do all these things to collect the $100. And the reality is that technology can now get you to a point where a lot of that stuff can be handled in the first 30 days. And so that's what we're handling.
And we've seen it in just the environmental health sector. When they send out bills electronically, they can just click, constituent gets the text or email, they click, go to on pay.
Yep.
The average days outstanding of their invoices go way down.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that larger and less anecdotally than we're seeing it?
Yeah. Well, what we believe is that there's about 30% of people don't pay their bill on time. Like no matter what government bill, about 30% of people don't pay.
Is that 30% intentional? They just on principle aren't going to pay it on time. And if you're not paying a government bill, you're probably going to lie about why, right?
Yeah. Or maybe you just don't even know you have it. Like there's a lot of these things that if it's coming in the mail and you don't collect your mail, your snail mail anymore, or you don't, maybe you do get a notice in an email and you don't see it, or you're out of town, or you're wintering in Europe, or you're summering in Canada, or whatever, and you miss some of these bills. But the reality is that of the 30% that aren't necessarily paying on time, we believe that almost 25% of those people, 20 to 25% of those people will pay if you just give them a notice. hey, your bill's ready, right?
And make it easier for them to act on it.
Just make it easier to act on it right now. And it's not just click and pay. It's click and utilize the same payment method I used last time, right? Or it's click and attach an ACH bank account to it so that it can literally just come out. And
you could auto debit in that case,
yeah,
right?
Or sign up for auto debit, and then you never have to worry about it again. We don't see, there's not as many people that are willing to do that. Like, I use cell phones as an example. So my power bill and my cell phone bill are the same to me. They're a requirement. And I've been in the industry now for 15 years, and I don't put auto pay on either of them because I still have this false sense of security of looking at my bill before I pay it.
Hey, that's funny. I wonder if it's a generational thing because we're very close to the same age. I don't do auto pay either because I'm like, well, I know I don't want to have to call and fight them for it back if they billed me wrong and then auto debited the overpayment.
Yeah. And I think that for some reason that bill might be wrong, and it rarely is, but you never know, because we've seen incidences over the last 25 years of somebody getting, an auto debit $10,000 bill for their power. And you're like, well, what happened there? And it was just a multiplier issue or something.
Yeah, an auto payment of 10 grand is catastrophic for most households.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it hits a credit card or your bank account, like, what do you do? And then it's not like they're putting it back in your account in 24 hours. Like you said, you have to call, prove that it wasn't right, and but I use my example of somebody who's been in the industry, understand the benefit of an auto pay, but don't sign up for it, compared to my daughter. So my daughter's 21 years old, is just starting to pay her own bills. She's out on her own and paying her own bills.
Don't want to think about it.
And she'll legitimately call me and be like, Dad, I don't know how to do this. Like, is there an app that I can press the button? Or, can I just put your credit card in and it just pays automatically?
The Bank of Dad card.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that is so. Well, maybe we're putting ourselves in the 30% that don't pay on time due to our aversion to auto pay.
Exactly.
So, in all that you're solely focused government now. So, in all of the time you've been doing it, if you look back, do you have a couple of wins or things that you guys could be at court, could be somewhere else that you've done, and you're like, okay, yeah, that we're making progress. We are climbing up that hill. Do you or maybe a story where the agency or whatever municipality you're working with got a huge win? Maybe they were skeptical up front, but they wish they'd have had it way earlier once you got it going for them.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna take it back to not necessarily win around the technology at first around core, but I'm gonna talk just about government and dealing with government, because you and I have had this conversation a lot. I think that we talk about the fact that there aren't a lot of lifers in gov tech. There's been some churn and everything else. But the dichotomy of the fact that our customers are almost always lifers.
Oh, that is so true.
Right? When people get into government, they stay. And so it's not uncommon for me to be dealing with somebody who came up through a utility or came up through the building department or came up through the muni at some point, and the chief administration officer is in his 30th year or her 30th year and literally has come up through government. And so one of the things that I talk to my team about is that we're in the relationship business. We're actually not in the technology business. We're in the relationship business. And government people want to do business with people they know. They want to do business with people they trust. And because we're not selling against ROI and we're not selling against this concept of the best value to get a payback on it for our customers and everything, we're selling against the concept of risk. Because nothing hurts a government agency more than blowing a budget, blowing a project, getting your name in the paper. Those are the things that hurt, especially government workers, because it can cost you your career. So one of the big wins that I think that we're doing a good job with is realizing how important it is to do a good job on behalf of our customers. And there isn't a vendor in the world that doesn't have issues, but making sure that we're responsive, we're transparent, being as fast as we can to understand the root cause, having a communication plan for constituents and for people that are impacted by it, making sure that things like data breaches are not, they're not part of what happens with us. We have people in our sector that just go through the annual breach, right? And you're like, God, how, like that's government data. If you want to talk about mistrust of government, you have to protect it. So I think one of the first wins that we have is just realizing that we're in the relationship sector and doing a good job with that. Carrying that forward, I'll tell a couple stories. One is just when utilities start to get advanced and some of the stuff that happens with it. So two cities that I worked with in my past, one is Metro, the Metro Utilities of Nashville, and the city of Santa Rosa, California. So one was an electric, and one was a water customer, and just the use of data to get a better sense for where leaks were happening. So California, major droughts in the past, and just finding out something as simple as, somebody's irrigation kept running, and being able to give an alarm, send out a message, and say, hey, something is happening. You've got a continuous flow alert happening. I don't know if your kids left a tap on, if the irrigation is still on, or if there's a line break, or your toilet is leaking. But this is going to cost you a lot of money because at a certain point your bills go way up. And one of the stories that we had was we had a customer who had a rental property, and it was not abandoned, but it was empty. And so they were showing people through the rental property, and they were out of country, and they had a property manager who was doing it. And as somebody would, you go in and you test the water pressure, and the water pressure in the main bathroom, they turned on the taps and it blew off the shower head. And whoever was looking at it just closed the door to the bathroom and walked out.
Didn't tell anybody.
Yeah. And you can imagine the force of the water that would be coming out of this thing. And the shower head actually kind of went and created a bit of a block at the tub. And so now is it not only flowing, but it's starting to build up, not really fast, but it's not draining as quick as it could. And our software gave an alert, and the property manager was go in after only 4 hours of flow. So it didn't overflow, and they didn't have, it could have been weeks of continuous flow and thousands of dollars of cost.
Flooded out the whole house.
And flooded out the house. And so that was just a cool example of software from the past. And then, in the payment space, I think we're at a point now where we've got a number of customers where it doesn't matter what you're paying, you can build your profile, and we're dealing with 25 different agencies in the city, and every single one of them will have the exact same experience, the exact same window. Their profile is available. They can store all of their methods, and it doesn't matter what you're paying for the city. It's all exactly.
And that's already deployed. That's out there.
Yeah, the Amazon-like experience with a shopping cart. So as you drag your bills, you can actually see all the things that you owe. It's really interesting.
Oh wow, that's been missing.
Yeah.
So we both live this. Implementations are tough, right? So integrations even sometimes can be more challenging. That sounds like that's a huge integration play on the back end, or not so much.
No, it is. It is that there's definitely the biggest challenge that any of us have is the number of disparate systems that exist in government, and some of them are legacy. Like you start getting systems that are 25, 30 years old.
Yeah,
you still have to integrate.
Or they'll say in an RFP, data will be coming from an AS400. And you're just like, oh, this is going to be fun.
I know. I tell people that the first big utility play that I had, we were taking data off a system called MV90. And the reason it was called MV90 was because it was built in 1990, and we were still using it well into the 2010s.
Is it like written in COBOL or something?
yeah, like just old systems. Man. But I think that what happens is that once you start doing them, there's a number of systems that are fairly familiar. So you start integrating one of them, and really it builds this idea that partnerships are super important. So we believe that the city, state, county really is the owner of the citizen or the constituent relationship. They should never be told that they have to do anything, right? Unless you make it a compelling offer that makes sense to them, right? So if this experience is better than something else, then great. But if I want to take a look at building something that's consistent and great across all of them, I should be able to do that. And that means integrations. And so partnerships become key to that. Like I need to know how to integrate with HS GovTech and, Itinerous CIS for a billing standpoint and utilities. I need to know how to deal with a justice system. I need to know how to deal with a more robust permitting system. I need to know I have to know all of these integrations. So what we've done is we've started building an integration service that actually becomes the one spot that everything comes into, and then talks to our software packages and talks to their systems. So, back
Wow.
to, and that can expand quickly into the concepts of data lakes or data farms. So you can start doing some really interesting automation off that. So when we start talking about the emergence of AI in GovTech, having access to data so that you can do those things is,
And something you can train it like
yeah,
I believe, not an expert in AI, but targeted AI. Like,
yeah,
obviously the general tools are phenomenal. People are using them more and more, but environmental health, perfect example. They don't have the full faith to ask like a chat GPT to give them a regulatorily accurate answer if they're like faced with something. Because the joke, it comes up a lot at conferences. You ask for a picture of the founding fathers and it ends up with a picture, paints you a picture of the village people. And I'm honestly not convinced. Like, that got kicked around as a political thing. Oh, it's a conspiracy. I'm not so sure. I think some of the people that complain about that, have you spent any time on the internet? There's some dark corners of the internet, and if AI trained on all of it,
yeah.
it's going to be a confused teenager. And I feel like maybe there's some of that going on too. The AI is at a confused
Yeah,
teenager
the ones that are
stage.
using the entire net, I think, are probably they're probably in a space that aren't great for government. But the tools where you can train them on
Yep.
a data set. So some of the things we've looked at, we like the ongoing update of ordinances for any government. So if you like, they have to become publicly documented the minute that they're not the minute, but right after that they're
Yeah.
voted on or approved by city council. And your AI can actually be keeping you up to date with changes in ordinance to allow you to change your software as necessary. So there's a data side there that's just kind of a no-brainer for us. But when you start taking a look at how the customers interact with it, how we interact internally with our own software, getting access to data and everything, you could have a team of analysts doing this stuff. But if you direct it in the right data sets and it starts to train itself on it, you get like the speed is uncanny. The
It,
stuff that you can do.
it's wild,
Yeah.
and it's really, really good. So if you, um, how long? Like, and I know the answer that agencies hate to hear, but it's an honest answer. It depends, right? Like,
Yeah.
it depends on what you want to do. But generally, if you're tying together power, a water, environmental health, like anything that the owner of a local restaurant, to like bring this home to our folks, like you have a person, they buy a permit from you, but that same person, as you've really well laid out, has a power bill, has a water bill, has taxes.
Mhm.
How long does it take? There's probably two parts to this. One is the political will and the decision by all the agencies. But let's assume for now that all of those agencies are, yes, we're in. We want to be part of a one smooth card experience.
Right.
How long does that take to tie in, since you don't even know sometimes going in what all you've got on the back end of all these other corners of these agencies?
Yeah. So I think you've touched on a couple things is the due diligence up front to understand what are we tying into and everything else. The major systems, most of them now have fairly well published APIs. So it's not as onerous as you'd think to tie into it. When you have a strong data service, you can bring those things together. But I think that there's a couple really big parts to it, is making sure that the agencies are bought in. And in our world, you don't typically charge the services to do the work. So we're trying to get at the clicks for the payments, and that's how we make money.
Yeah.
So, one of the misnomers is when you hear about the PayPals and stuff of the world, like, they might be huge companies, but they're making pennies per transaction. And so we're not like gouging customers to make all this money on a per transaction basis, but we want to get at as many of them as possible. And so we don't charge the services. Well, anybody who sold government for any length of time realize that when you don't have a capital budget line item against a project, it's really hard to get resources and all those things against it.
Yeah.
And so when you don't charge somebody, it might be great for the government because there isn't a cost outlay, but it's bad from a resource standpoint because you're not actually getting dedicated resources. Somebody's sometimes doing it off the side of their desk. What we've seen, though, is that Treasury and IT are really working together to find solutions to bigger problems like 8,000 open headcount recs in local government, right? They can't fill it. Nobody wants to work in government anymore, especially in the finance and customer facing positions. Like nobody wants to sit in a booth and take a payment anymore. Like, it's just not, it's not a job that's in high demand. And so I think between IT and Treasury, they're saying, how do we become 5x, 10x more efficient in the next 10 years? And and again, another opportunity for GovTech to really step up and say, I'm not just selling you what I always do. I'm selling you a solution to not being able to hire that person, to finding an ability for the people that are working there to be doing more creative and innovative work, to increase cash flows quickly, and get a citizen slash constituent experience that's just more rewarding.
What is that? It's actually really good that IT and Treasury are working together because that helps put kind of a roadmap and what's out there, right? And who's I know it'd be a question if someone could ask right now, they'd probably ask. We're an environmental health department. We already are processing payments with Core and HS Cloud Suite. What would be the first step for an agency like that? It may not be a technical one. It may be of who do you have a conversation with? Where would you, if somebody's asking you that question, they're like, we love what we're doing with you guys. And yeah, everybody should just be in one central portal. How would they move that ball forward? Like, who is there? Would it be a Treasury or IT discussion they should go have?
I think so. I think that if they've seen an increase in customer satisfaction because of how much easier it's become, right? Or they're getting as you mentioned, a text that says "Pay now," and it's increasing the number of payments, the quality of payments, it's decreasing defaults and delinquency. I think the first step is just to say, this has made a difference. Like our especially in that scenario, our business customers who are used to buying stuff online and getting stuff delivered next day, or having centralized purchasing for their restaurants or their nail salon or whatever, my payment experience with my city is exactly the same. Like it's great. And so how do you have that conversation with city IT and city finance to say, you see how our payments have increased in cleanliness and just, it's just been a better experience. Why don't we bring these guys aren't just like, they're embedded in our health and safety, environmental health and safety system, but they could also be embedded in our utility system and in our tax system and in our ticket system and everything else. Why don't we bring them in to have that conversation?
And of course, they could always reach out to you. That we will put Chris's email and contact information in the description across all the platforms for the episode. And I'm sure you'd be happy to have an email from someone who says, "Hey, we want more information about this," or "What do I need to take to Treasury and IT to at least make sure it's on their radar?"
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, references are always the best. So if it's an internal reference and they're having a great experience with HS Pay, then I think that's the best thing.
And that goes back to that whole concept, doesn't it, of that negative downside protection risk is you don't want to end up in the paper. And that's powerful. If someone can prove to their sister agencies, hey, look, we're collecting our money faster, we're having less mistakes. I think maybe government was not resistant, but slower in adopting before, because government is almost by definition a monopoly, right? Just a personal theory, but if you're a private organization, you have a huge incentive, especially if you've got competitors on your heels, to get a better checkout experience and to make that better. Government hadn't had to, but it feels like that tide is starting to turn, right? That just the way we always used to do it is enough because we don't have, nobody can stop us. That's not cutting it anymore, is it?
No, I think from two sides. I think that the generational shift in people that will walk down to City Hall to pay their bills because it's almost a regular occurrence, and maybe they know Nancy at the desk, and it's a relationship side. And I've dealt with the Caribbean in the past, and islands in the Caribbean. It's like they put out coffee and juice and stuff, and
it's almost like a social experience.
It's a social experience, yeah. And so, but I think that as we move to, my mother was really interesting. She would never pay online with something with her credit card because she didn't trust putting her credit card in, but she'd write a check and put it in the mail and send it. I'm like, Mom, do you have any idea how easy it is to steal your information off
and the
that
routing
check?
numbers right there.
Yeah. It's like, and she's like, well, no, Chris, I don't.
That's so funny. That's a generational thing, right?
Absolutely. But wait, I use the comparison between my mother and my daughter, funny. And my daughter, like she would never even know how to go to a bank or City Hall to pay something. She's like, write a check. What's a check? And so I think that as the general public has gotten more comfortable with everything online, the expectation that my relationship with my government is online is very, very much there. Combined with the fact that government has to find a way to get more efficient. Like, we're at a point now where the spend, just the general spend that happens in government is not sustainable. We've all seen it. It's just not sustainable. Like they bring in someone like Elon Musk to try to find efficiencies. You know, we could have a long conversation about the way they're approaching it, but the concept is right. There is waste in government. There is bureaucracy. There is lines of things. I heard a statement, and we're going to go Canadian on this for a little bit, but Vancouver, Canada is one of the most expensive real estate markets in North America.
Yeah, it is.
It is crazy. It's crazy up there. But what they talk about is that in the time value of money to just get all of your building permits to build a new house in the city of Vancouver, you spend 3 times the cost to build the structure. You know, and so like you could go buy your $1 million piece of property. And by the way, that gets you like a very small piece of property in the city of Vancouver.
And not in a great neighborhood.
No, and
right?
not in a great neighborhood.
My wife is from Vancouver, and it's stunning every time we go there. Like, you Google a lot with a place being demolished is $1.4 million. It's crazy.
Yeah, you know, I have family that live out there. My son's going to school out there, so I spend quite a bit of time out there. I just got access to a condo for the summer, and I'm excited to spend some time in Kitsilano for the summer out there. But to buy there would be a multi-million-dollar purchase and 3 years of permitting. Like, you can't just buy a house, knock it down, and build one in a year. Like, it just doesn't happen. And that's all because of the multiple layers of bureaucracy and what I'd call waste that happens. And it's like, I use Vancouver because I'm knowledgeable of it, but it's not uncommon. This is happening everywhere in North America.
And it's not always. And I think one of the reasons this gets to be a hot topic and people go to their corners is to say that there's waste or inefficiency is not at all saying someone's doing something wrong or illicit.
No.
It's just that bureaucracies have this way. And it's not that someone's trying to gouge anybody. I mean, there's cases where there's others, but most of the time it's the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Yeah.
As opposed to like malign.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that we don't seem to equate the cost, because it doesn't mean that we're paying out of our pocketbook for a lot. You know what I mean? It's the cost of the permit doesn't become $400,000, but the time cost, just the amount of time that's being spent in it.
It's a hidden tax.
It's a hidden tax because, you know, our taxes and the monetization of government services are what's supporting all of that. But if something takes 4 years to get done, it's just another tax on everything else, because your contractor time is going to cost more. Everything else is going to cost more. And so I think that all of us are expecting technology as it gets into government to show some efficiencies, for sure.
All right. So one more question about just the day-to-day, the payment processing stuff. And then it would be a crime to not talk about your football career, which was really fascinating. And this is not, we don't throw shade on anybody, so no names, but is it a true perception, kind of part one, that there's a lot of small providers out there and they promise a lot, and an agency will lock themselves up in a contract and they hear somebody like you, it's eye-opening. They're like, oh man, we can't do ACH. There's no integration to anything. We can't do American Express. There's some weird restrictions. Mm-hmm. Is it to some degree true that the market has some additional education and shaking out to do for really going to that top enterprise level? Because not all of the providers out there promising the world to government are created equal.
No, I think it's great. And again, I'm not throwing shade on anybody, not trying to single out names, but I think it's a function of the history. So if you walk back 15 years, maybe not even have to go that far, 10, 12 years ago, when online payments were really starting to be a thing. Like people were setting up merchant accounts, people were setting up things. So I think the question that you would have to ask yourself is that as a city or a county or a state, if you're going in to pay a bill and you get redirected to another third-party page that doesn't look like the city's page, that has a different name on it, that is XYZ payments, it actually leads to the lack of trust that is happening with online payments in government. Because we've all been taught now that if a strange page comes up and asks you for your credit card, don't put it in, right? But you go back 10, 12 years, a lot of these payment relationships that were built were typically a regional guy or girl who got into the business and figured it out and has some kind of system. And maybe they're, maybe they're a big provider in the state of Carolina, North Carolina, or maybe they're, they're even more regional and they just have, a bunch of county payments and something. What's happened is that through compliance, so the PCI compliance is really important. Looking at people's SOC 2 and having that level of compliance, making sure that they don't have breaches and those kind of things are important. So there's some great providers in the space. I don't want to, of course, please use Core, but I think that, but yeah. There's great providers I've worked with and for many of them. But I would say that there's a time period now where the small regional providers that built their businesses on what payments, third-party payment screens looked like, they're probably not adequate for the government relationship that we're looking at building. Not just us, that the world is looking at building as far as trust and reliability in that. And I think that you've mentioned a couple things which are really interesting. We're looking really closely, even though it's not a huge opportunity, meaning there's not a lot of people using it today. When you start to look at, can you pay your utility bills? Can you pay your government bills with Venmo? So it's an interesting aspect where people are like, well, why would I pay my bill with Venmo when I have a Visa card or I have a bank account? So here's the situation that if you're underbanked or unbanked, so I don't carry a bank account and maybe I have to go and take my paycheck that I'm still getting a check and I have to go to a check cashing place and I have to choose between my power bill and groceries and stuff. And there's a lot of Americans and Canadians that are in that position right now. Being able to digitize that cash onto my Venmo app and use it to pay my bills is a different option than carrying a credit card or carrying a bank account.
And what was the percent you said earlier of the unbanked? It's
as high as 18%, right? And I think there's a large link to that towards, and the reality is that there is a workforce in both my country and yours that aren't keeping their money in bank accounts for lots of different reasons.
Yep.
And so, but they're still paying utility bills. They still have rent to pay. They still have, they still get parking tickets, and they don't, and especially if somebody is unemployed or if they're disabled or if they're on some kind of social assistance, if they aren't doing it online, they have to get on a bus and go to 3 different places. Like a lot of places don't even have a central cashiering opportunity at City Hall for some of this stuff. You have to go to the utility office or the utility, and then you have to go to the courthouse, and then you have
and that's regressive on someone who already is on fixed income, unbanked. That's time they probably would prefer to be working. Earning money.
Absolutely. So that this is the scenario with it, is that we're putting them in situations because of the lack of technology that they have to give up a day of work, which is, another $60 that they got to earn, legitimately.
It's insane.
It's a tough situation that can be solved very quickly by our governments just taking a look at it and going, we can make this easier on all of our constituents.
And you guys have the ability to work with Venmo too, don't you?
Yeah. And so I was saying so whether it's Venmo, Apple Pay, Google Pay, obviously Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, ACH. So I think the key with this isn't making it super limited and coming full circle to some of the smaller providers. Like you said, there's some weird restrictions that have been happening in the space, and it's largely a function of what they've set up years ago.
That makes so much sense. And, PCI, SOC 2, these are things that probably, if they did that years ago, technology is in a different place. Those standards were in a different place. And some of these agencies may not even know that they have risk.
Yeah.
Just because it's working. It might be ugly, but it works. I think you guys also track, because you're very sophisticated, your data tracking, and the term might not mean anything to the audience, so I'll explain it real quick. Abandoned cart, right? So somebody is like, I click, I go log in, I'm going to pay. For some reason, I get cold feet or I back out. Do you think that is abandoned cart rates driven up by that referral to a site that people are like, is this spam? What are primary drivers of abandoned cart, and is that one of them?
Yeah, so this is something that's pretty near and dear to me as far as like actual user data. So when you start looking, and we're just looking at it now as a place to drive some of our our future development. But the whole industry is focused on click and pay. Click here, pay now. Click here, pay now. But to your point, how many people get to a point where they want to pay and then don't? And so that user journey that starts with, I have 2 speeding tickets, a parking ticket, a utility bill, and my dog permit that I need to cover. And we've seen some interesting data that says that by the time they get to a cart that's at, like, say, $600, they'll drop. And so
interesting.
Yeah,
so there's a price tolerance in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's all reasonable. Like, when we think about it, I rarely make a purchase online that would be over $100, never mind $600.
Yeah.
And so when my shopping cart gets to $600, the idea that I'm putting that on a credit card or taking it out of my bank account, like, it's going to make me pause, and it should make most people pause. Now, in other places that we've seen, like retail, it automatically gives you a multi-payment option. So government payment plans to cover off non-recurring payments. So there's a bit of a hook there, that if you get somebody to pay their utility bill in a payment plan, then it eventually 4 months later it catches up. But if you're in a situation where you've got all these different government requirements for payments, and the government can easily say, we know that people abandon payment and often don't come back after $600. We say, can you pay $150 today and $150 for the next 4 months? And now most people go, yeah, I can handle that.
Yeah.
So
because not all their stress in life solved, but the stress of that pain point is solved, because the $600 they don't have to pay today, but they also have stress. They don't want their lights to get cut off.
Yeah,
right. Like,
exactly.
there's real penalties for failing and not paying. So is that the same thing as, like, when you go to a checkout, click to pay, and it offers you, there's a kind of providers, right? Affirm. You see all those logos when you check out. Same general concept, or you can break it up into multiple parts over a few weeks.
Yeah. So I think that in retail, we see all these people that do this, kind of pay as you go, or different kind of payment options. I think our solution in government would be, most governments have a tolerance for saying, we want to collect your money. We don't want to put you in a bad situation, so we'll approve a payment plan for you. The process to do that is somewhat laborious today, where they somebody's eyes have to be on it. They have to go back and see if you've ever defaulted.
Which is probably why they're not doing it, right? The tech has to solve it, or it's just unwieldy.
Yeah. Otherwise, you have to hire 5 more people in order just to offer payment plans. But the reality is that the standards or the levels that those decisions get made are usually codified. So if it's codified, I can put it in my software. If my software can say, so as long as John hasn't bailed on a payment plan in the last 2 years, and he meets this criteria, just auto approve it. Like actually proactively offer it at levels over $600
and get it off of your default list.
Yeah, because you know that there's a likelihood, the data says that there's a likelihood that person is not going to pay, and they're going to bail on that and never come back. They'll take the risk of their lights going off, their car getting booted, or them having a warrant, as opposed to just paying their fines, their utility bill, and their parking ticket.
That is fascinating. And there is a tie-in to environmental health, because during the pandemic, restaurants were either closed down or carry out only, and they were seeing huge delinquencies on payments. And so some of our agencies, and this was before early days of the pandemic, it was before you were at CORE, before we had partnered, the organizations had partnered, and full disclosure, we're sister companies, right? We're owned by the same ownership group. And it's interesting because it was the right thing at the right time, but it was a nightmare for the agencies, because they ended up having a person or persons that would literally, like, go through a spreadsheet and say, okay, this group is due today, and if we don't see the payment post tomorrow, then they'd reach out. That what you guys are doing just automates it all, right?
Yeah.
It's going to reach out, it's going to remind, it's going to take the payment and cut out all of that paper chase of chasing those smaller incremental payments.
Yeah. And again, full disclosure, we're not quite there with the full automation, but we're doing it in certain subsectors of agencies where we know this is what a payment plan looks like. We can auto approve it based on stipulations. Boom. But I think it should take off, because I think that delinquency is high in government. It's a sector that'll spend more than you owe to collect. The experience of being collected on induces shame. It induces like when your lights get turned off. Like I've lived it. Personal background. I didn't always grow up in any kind of an affluent environment. I was pretty poor growing up, and so when you come home and there's no power in the house. I can only imagine how my parents felt. Like it's a scenario where like, dang man, we missed that one, but we have food today, and so we're gonna have to make that decision. And so I think that when taking the whole shame out of it and automatically giving somebody that doesn't have to talk to another person and say, I don't have the means to do this today, and it's automated, you actually make it a much more positive experience. People don't distrust government. They don't feel like they're always out to get them. And I think there's something great that we could do with that.
Yeah, it takes away that adversarial, because I think people do this with commercial relationships too. There's a certain subsect that if they can't pay it, the shame literally, they make it worse because they hide.
Yeah, it'll prevent them from even having the conversation.
Like send that to voicemail. That looks like the county coming to collect.
Yeah.
Like I can't face that today.
Yeah, I bet that there is a large portion of the population that when they see the 1-800 number, they know it's either solicitation or it's collection, and just never answer the phone. And to the possible detriment of your power staying on, your water running, your car being disabled.
Huge risk.
Huge.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't wait until you guys keep scaling this to other areas. I think that environmental health departments will have a real use for that. It harkens back to 2 episodes ago, this exact scenario, but in food carts. They were talking about the problem with unpermitted vendors. They may serve great food. They're trying to just feed their family, take care of things. And in a lot of cases, they don't know, or they're intimidated of the process of being made legit. The whole thing of shame, or if I have to choose to pay rent today or go buy a permit for my car, rent's going to win.
Yeah,
like
always.
every time.
Yeah.
And there's a huge applicability in the food cart area to be able to say, like you said, with some reasonable checks of, like, if the person's going to just dash and burn you, fine. But with a little due diligence and underwriting, which a system can do, I think it's going to be huge. I think you'll hear from folks about, hey, tell me more about that. So we will put all of your information in the description, and you can reach out to HS GovTech, your rep there too, because we're partners, and we'll either route you through to them, or if you're an HS Cloud user, we have the existing pipes to do this and put it together. I would be absolutely remiss, looking at our clock there, I'd be absolutely remiss if we didn't leave though without talking about your football career. Like people that do interesting things, and it puts them in the company of interesting people. It's a very small percent. I mean, small percentage, like at the level you have. So you played in the CFL, right? And like the CFL, just so is in terms of setup, my wife's from Canada, so I've watched some CFL football. It's a fun game to watch. The field is different dimensions.
You go
4 downs.
Like so it's people that aren't familiar with it, and my American friends bug me. They're like, oh, is that real football and everything? And so there's a couple things that if you have a chance to Google Terrell Owens on the CFL, because he has a Google clip where he's like, it's not a joke. Like he came up and played. T.O. came up and played,
and he thought he was going to run the place.
Was it T.O. or Chad Ochocinco? One of the two came up and played a year in the CFL and thought he would just dominate, and was like, man, it's no joke. Like a lot of, like, we had Div 1 All-Americans on our team. It's a really good, and my era, like Doug Flutie was our MVP. Jeff Garcia is a personal friend and played with him. The Walter Payton Award out of the University of Montana in 1995, Dave Dickinson, is the head coach of the Calgary Stampeders in the CFL and a really good personal friend. And he was with the Chargers when Doug was there. So my background, I can't sit in front of you and legitimately say that it was like, yes, I made pro, but I was a Canadian special team player who got a couple of years, a year in BC and a year in Calgary. It wasn't anything super special. But our university game, I know college football in the U.S. is just so huge. And we've got a pretty robust college game that happens in Canada as well right now. And the school that my son's a scholarship player in Vancouver, and the school out there, UBC, one of their linemen went in the 5th round of last year's NFL draft to the Detroit Lions. And 2 other guys from the team signed right after the draft as free agents and stuck with the team. So like the Canadian football scene is second only to America in the world
Yeah.
as far as the quality of players that are coming out. And we'll see over the next couple of days. There will likely be a number of Canadians that get drafted over the next couple of days
for sure.
And so there's a lot of cool things that happen up there. But I had a chance to play in my hometown, so I played, my youth football, my high school football, my college football, and my first year of pro, all in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and ended up playing for the Calgary Stampeders. And all three of our quarterbacks went from the Stampeders to the NFL. So there's Jeff Garcia, who had an all-pro career, like San Francisco 49ers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Cleveland Browns. Like he was a perennial all-star. He's been on the potential ballot for the Hall of Fame now a couple of years. Like he's one of those names besides Flutie that came out of the CFL and did some big things. And then Dave Dickinson and a guy named Henry Burris. So those were our three quarterbacks. All of them either played or got a cup of coffee in the NFL. But it was great. And we played against Flutie. Marcus Allen's brother Damon is one of the all-time passing leaders in all of football. For those of you that go back far enough and you know the name Warren Moon.
Oh yeah, Oilers.
Warren Moon came out of the CFL.
That's right,
so,
he did.
Yeah, he was with the Edmonton Eskimos. I grew up in Edmonton, so he was like my idol.
Is that still their name? I don't
no, they've changed it to the Elks now.
Okay,
it's now
I was
the
going to
Edmonton
say,
Elks. Yeah.
I thought they had like a la the Redskins, right?
Yeah,
like there's just certain things that didn't wear so well, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting though is that we call them First Nations in Canada. The Indigenous people around the city of Edmonton sued the club for removing the name because
Really?
they didn't find it offensive. They found
Which is
it
the same thing
yeah.
in the U.S. with the Redskins
Yeah.
when they actually polled the Native American community. Like most of them were like, "No, we love it. Like it's pride.
Well, yeah, and
pride.
the logo is an actual person, right? That's a representation of Chief, whatever his name is, of this tribe. So I think that the pendulum swings, and we never want to be offensive to anybody, but I think that there's a historic culture to some of this stuff, which is pretty cool too.
And it was not meant to malign. And
no,
in fact, there's actually a move afoot recently. Like there's some people rumbling about bring back the name the Redskins. The Commanders just doesn't have the same feel to the people. Of course, being from Charlotte, we didn't have a football team when I was growing up. We didn't have a football team. The
Right.
Panthers came in '96, I think. So the Redskins were usually the TV game we got on Sunday. And so, yeah, I would never call myself a fan of the Redskins per se, but that was the team you kind of got to follow because back before cable was the way it is now, you got whatever the game of the week was on CBS or,
For sure. For sure. That's why almost everybody in Calgary are Seahawk fans. My wife is a diehard Seahawk fan because we got Seattle TV.
Yep, the Seattle.
But it's interesting in this town. So your running back who just signed a big contract, Chuba Hubbard, right? He's from Alberta. High school.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he played high school football just north of where I'm from in Edmonton, and went down to Oklahoma State out of Canada, and then signed with the Panthers and just signed a big deal this year. And he still comes home and trains in Alberta in the off season sometimes, and Smart Performance in Calgary is his brother is with the Bears. Alex, who runs Smart, he works with people at all levels. So full circle, it's kind of cool to be from football heritage to have made pro, and it was a short career. I only played a couple of years and I got hurt, and I wasn't a very big guy, but you go run into things.
But they just don't let anybody onto those teams,
No,
CFL or NFL. Like it's impressive. And like, you knew Flutie? You played against him?
Played against him and had conversations with him. I think that if I'm looking at those big conversations, like Doug was obviously a huge icon in Canada, but
and then he went to Buffalo, right?
I think maybe back to the Patriots first, then San Diego, then Buffalo. I believe was maybe his lineage. I think he ended in Buffalo. I don't remember the exact scenario for him, but Jeff Garcia and I are still to this day buddies, and his was watching him be the MVP in Canada and then go play for the Niners. And I think him and Terrell Owens still have it was Chad. I'm pretty sure it was Chad Ochocinco who came up to Canada, but like Tio and Garcia still have like an awesome connection record. Like when you think about those Niner teams, I believe that Jeff and Terrell might have the most prolific quarterback receiver relationship in 49er history.
Which that's saying something.
Yeah, Montana and
Rice.
Young, and like there's some pretty big names there, and so and it was really cool. But I think the biggest thing about it is just learning these lessons of perseverance and teamwork and and uniqueness, and even the Canadian game has got all this motion in it. It's really interesting as a American football fan. There's one person moving and they have to stop before you go. Well, in the Canadian game, everybody can move. Like there's all this motion.
It's wild.
Everything. Yeah. And the field, like you said, the field's 13 yards wider, and I've been a coach for 25 years now, and everybody's like, oh, so you just run a lot of tosses. I'm like, no, we just throw the ball more. Like you just,
if you like a run and gun or a move it up and down, and you played 4 downs a lot in the CFL too.
It's actually only 3. That's interesting too. You only have 3 downs. Yeah,
you're punting on third, right?
Yeah. So you only have 3 downs. So you have to average 5 yards of play if you're going to do it in 2 downs. And
so you don't grind it out 3 yards at a time on the ground. Running it up the gut.
Yeah, no, it's strategic about when you call the runs and plays. And there's another Google clip, like if you want to learn about the CFL, where Flutie is talking about kind of the birth of the RPO. So the run pass option was really kind of started in Canada. And Damon Allen, Marcus's brother, was a guy who would like hand it off, and he was just given allowances to let it go. And if he made a read, then he wouldn't give it to the back and he'd take off because he was a running quarterback. And so, and you got guys that came and watched some of the CFL and then took it down into the States. So yeah, fun part of my history to have been playing in those levels and have the friends that I do.
They literally, percentage wise, it's a unicorn to make a professional sports league. So I couldn't leave without talking about that.
Well,
so
thanks for bringing it up.
But for the EH audience, I really hope you've enjoyed the discussion about payments. We'll post Chris's information and reach out, and they're not going to pressure you. You're not going to get a sales pitch. They have a heart for. You heard it from his own words. I won't even recap that. They have a heart to see this get better. It's a mission play. It's a passion play. That's who you want to be working with at the end of the day. Not somebody that maybe was hot in 2005, but hasn't kind of kept going up from there. So thank you for venturing across the border. And
I appreciate
it coming down here.
I appreciate being here, and it's been a great time, eh?
Yeah,
and,
man.
So you did it. Just had to drop one of those in just to let everybody know that I am Canadian.
I look forward to having dinner with you tonight before you get back on a plane, and we'll have you back on. But the payment thing is not going away, and you guys are going to keep innovating. We're going to keep doing things.
I'd appreciate it.
So we'll talk some more. So thank you. If you guys have any thoughts, comments, we read them all. You can, or show ideas or guests, please keep those coming. Beyond at hscloudsuite.com, beyond at hscloudsuite.com. For a quick shout out as well in the control room to David Stiles, Christina Miller, producer. Thank you all so much. They leave us the easy part and make us look good and do a lot of hard work in the control room. For all of us here at HS GovTech, Beyond Data Management podcast, brought to you by HS GovTech. I'm Cameron Garrison. Thanks so much for spending the last hour and change with us, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks.